to bring into the conversation now for analysis on this Tebogo Khaas, who is with Public Interest South Africa. Tebogo wrote extensively this past week on the evidence that was led before the commission by Colonel Brian Padiachi, who is a member of IDAC. Tebogo, perhaps to start there, were you satisfied with the detail of the work that will be undertaken by the oversight body there, led by Judge Takalani Raulinga?
Oliver, thank you for that question. We always live by the mantra, hope springs eternal, because without hope, we'd all be dead. But having said that, we are cautiously welcoming of the announcement, although there's a lot of red flags already that we've picked up insofar as what was disclosed or rather shared with the media today. Firstly, it appears to us that the office of the Oversight Judge, now that it's no longer office of the Ombuds Judge, is not ready to do its work. It is still reliant on infrastructure from the Justice Department, as well as not having mechanisms in place to accept securely reports either from the members of the public or from civil society organization or anyone who wants to report, save for what he said there'll be a box at the, set aside at the ALU building. I suppose that must be the tender box, or they'll make a special one for such complaints to be placed in. But that is not a secure environment to start with. You already know what happens to whistleblower reports, as you've rightly referenced the fact that Advocate Andrea Johnson and Feroz Khan were able to share each other information, or that was protected disclosure. I think it was Advocate Johnson, Batoyi as well. In circumstances where you would have thought that that information is treated in a manner that gives confidence to the system. Now, the biggest challenge now is what mechanisms do they have in place to ensure that such information will be protected, especially if they're just going to be dropped off at a box somewhere without any mechanism to mark its receipt and confidentially encrypt it and make sure that only the right people who are meant to receive that information do and act on it. But also what worried me most is the issue of transparency. When asked what they are currently investigating, he basically did not have an answer, or rather he obfuscated, because what use would it be for the office to hide or to not share with the public who has been reported and for what, without disclosing the merits or the nitty-gritties of the complaint itself? Because that is information that should be publicly available, because if it is hidden, how are you to know that indeed X, Y, and Z have been reported and for what? And it might actually duplicate reports, if I do not know.
Just to that, there is a standard practice within our jurisprudence that allows for investigating bodies to withhold such information, at least in instances where the parties that are being investigated have not yet been informed they're investigated. And so disclosing that publicly might potentially, some argue, jeopardize the investigation, because those who are being investigated may well know that they're now being investigated and may begin to surreptitiously begin to move certain things around to ensure that certain information becomes inaccessible, opaque at best, and to misdirect the investigating officers.
Fair enough, Oliver. That's not what, maybe just to clarify, if a report is already been made and an investigation conducted, it is fair to disclose that X, Y, and Z has been reported for this matter, and there's an ongoing investigation. That's all. We don't need to give the details as to what has been investigated. Already we know that there are reports that Advocate Johnson has been referred to the Office of Ethics and Accountability at NPA. For an example, an inquiry was done, a report was sent to the minister. The minister is currently dealing with it. That is public information. That's all. We don't need to know the nitty-gritties of what was uncovered and to what extent the charge is going to be, or what she's going to be faced at any tribunal, if any tribunal will be constituted. That is precisely what I'm saying, because if you are just going to say, we're investigating, but we won't tell you the extent, just like we have National Treasury restricted tender supplier and defaulters. We need to know who has been reported and for what. And that's all. And especially if they are notified. You don't say before people are notified. You notify them first, and then you tell us that you're investigating them. That's all that would suffice. But going back to that point, we are saying also, to the extent that they don't seem to be ready to actually do their work, for us, that is a worry. That's a big worry. And other than that, we will support as public interest the efforts of the office, as well as ensure that we channel reports. But the question is, who's going to monitor their work, their performance? We have got, for example, the Office of Ethics and Accountability in the NPA, which receives reports of ethics violations or transgressions electronically through a system that is managed elsewhere, externally. But nobody monitors what happens of those reports, whether were they investigated, were they closed, under what circumstances were they closed, if they're investigated, what is the status of those investigations? Because that level of transparency does not augur well for trust in the system itself. Then there's a transparency that we keep on talking about, that if you don't even notify individuals who reported the extent of their reports and where they are seated, and you also have individuals rely on public to keep on pestering reports, that for us is a no-no. And we're hoping that that's some of the things that the office will actually try and avoid or ameliorate.
Yeah, let's talk about that independence. So just maybe a last question to pontificate on here. Like you said, that this office still very much relies on the infrastructure of the Justice Department. And in answering a question, Judge Raulinga says that they're independent of the Justice Department. Of course, I mean, the complaints portal that they currently use is based on the domain of the Justice Department, which leaves some concern around whether or not who might be able to access some of those complaints if protected disclosures is an important part of their work. How quickly do you think they should be able to set up their own independent infrastructure? Or is this a sign that this was hurriedly put together by the minister in order to respond to what has clearly been public controversy around IDAC?
Well, as far as we're concerned, we would have loved for that infrastructure to have been put in place long before, ahead of the launch of the office itself. In other words, that is the work that should have happened in the background before they even spoke about it. Yes, we are cognizant of maybe the pressure that is emanating from the revelations at the Madlanga Commission to ensure that the executive responds and shows that it is working on something to deal with the complaints that have been flooding the public domain, especially around IDAC and its head, Andrea Johnson. But having said that, we would like to believe that the Justice Raulinga was appointed some time ago, I believe last year or early this year. So it was just a matter of maybe inertia within the department itself in terms of making sure that it is officially launched. But I would imagine events that are currently happening before Madlanga and other tribunals are putting pressure on making sure they actually do announce it. But again, they missed out on making sure that they had the requisite infrastructure. So it could be a bit of both, but we believe that it was genuinely an effort by the Department of Justice to have this office implemented, which is something that was already announced, I think, last year or early this year.
Okay, and just a last consideration here, and this is on the reportage in the Sunday papers that Minister Mmamoloko Kubayi is or will be approaching President Ramaphosa to suspend IDAC head Andrea Johnson. What's your view on that? Yeah, we're none the wiser, save for what has been reported on. It is common cause that public interest, as I did, make representations to the NPA, which were then, we believe a report was forwarded to the minister. We don't know the contents of that report. We haven't been favored with a copy. So we only learning from what the minister has been reported as having said through the media and other public forum where she made mention of any such related matter. However, we are hopeful that indeed
with what has been going on around this issue, action will be taken and must be taken, and the sooner the better, because it cannot be that we have, as head of an institution at the helm of fighting corruption and crime, having such a huge cloud above their head. And this is not in any way to find guilt on her part, or that she must be led. So whatever action, precautionary or otherwise, that the department may consider, or the president may consider, it is something that we will be supportive of. But obviously, we can't rush, jump the gun until the minister or the president themselves have pronounced on this matter. We are none otherwise are just like any other member of the public reviewing reports.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to leave it at Tebogo Khaas. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Tebogo Khaas is with Public Interest South Africa.